One of the things that Julia and I realized early on is that if you have a central message of a moral core that is common to people, that people can understand, that it really can help you achieve positive change. And so we selected a theme which was pretty obvious: love your neighbor. But partly, and I've said this many times, it's partly, thank you, Julia, it's partly because if you start any conversation, discussion, division, if you start it with, let's agree, can we agree to love your neighbor? Can we agree with that as a foundation? If you do agree to that, you're going to win that argument because you are on the moral high ground. And if the person says, no, I'm not going to say love your neighbor because you're a fancy lawyer, you're going to get me to start admitting things I don't want to admit. But when you start with love your neighbor, you end up in a good place. And so part of what we've that's been a sub-theme throughout all of the events that we've held, and it's a specific theme of these next several weeks. Many of you might have seen the photograph and voices of our next 4 speakers over the next 4 Sundays in our Love Your Neighbor series. And we're hoping that people will continue to show up, not only because you see your own reverend or pastor or rabbi speaking on the agenda that day, but also that you're interested in hearing what people of different faith traditions have to say about the importance of love your neighbor. So we're really excited to start this series and very happy that our first speaker is the Reverend Tony Lorenzen of the Mattituck Unitarian Universalist Society. Please welcome back Reverend Tony. Woo!
Occupying the moral center. I like that. So, different faith perspectives may be useful to know just a little bit about us Unitarian Universalists. Unlike many faith traditions, we have no creed, we have no dogma. Does not mean you can believe whatever you want. But we do share some common values we call principles. And the very first one is to respect the dignity and worth of every human person. We start off as a given that there is no such thing as a lesser person. And I need to remember that often because there's a lot of my neighbors I don't like. I don't like them much at all. I don't like the people holding a sign as I was driving down here Route 6 that said, "Don't vote for Democrats, they're all liars." I don't like my neighbors who put Patriot Front stickers on our road signs advertising their hate group. I don't like my neighbors who use anti-Semitic slurs at some of our local officials. There's a lot of my neighbors I don't like. And when I get into this place, you see it gets me upset. When I get into this place, something that's always helped me with this is when Martin Luther King said, "I'm glad Jesus told me to love my enemies because there's some people I find it really hard to like."
Amen.
Thank God for that reminder because there's a lot of people I find it really, really hard to like. I think it's easy for me to understand that when we talk about love your neighbor, we mean all your neighbors, even the ones I find really hard to like. I don't find it much of a problem to love my gay neighbor, my trans neighbor, my black neighbor, my white neighbor, and my native neighbor, and my neighbors of all stripes and faith. No problem whatsoever. I have a little harder time loving the hateful neighbors. But there's the big challenge, is that if we keep loving, we've got to keep going down a road of trying to learn how to communicate, learn how to make a bridge. Sometimes that bridge isn't going to be reciprocated. But if we don't try, we create a self-fulfilling prophecy where we're always banging heads, not listening to each other, and we've created a monster of them the way they've created a monster of us. And you can't become the monster you want to defeat. It doesn't work that way. So we've got a very real challenge of loving our neighbor, a common value, come to the middle. When Dr. King said, I'm glad I was told to love my neighbors, not like them, he follows it with this. Love is understanding redemptive goodwill to all people. Understanding redemptive goodwill to all people. I don't know about you, but I find it hard to offer goodwill to people who are hateful toward others. But I can offer redemptive love. It may not get to goodwill first, but it will be redemptive first. And when I offer the redemptive love, means I don't put them beyond love's reach. Nobody is beyond love's reach. Once I write them off, I'm doing the same thing they've done to others. The same hate, the same exclusion, the same leaving everybody out as not as good as everyone else. So, understanding my neighbors who wear red MAGA hats, I don't know where to begin. I gotta admit, I'm kind of at a loss sometimes. But one thing I know is that I'm never going to get to that place of redemptive goodwill if they don't know who I am and I don't know who they are. I have an interesting challenge I gave myself this year. I walk my dog, some of you know Pancake. I walk Pancake at Hollow Park virtually every day in Woodbury. There's a couple of guys there who are amazing. They take care of the grounds, they mow the lawn, they pick up, they do everything. One of them's a younger man, and I talk to him a lot. And it is very obvious he and I occupy different ends of a certain spectrum on many things. He loves my dog. Will give her treats every time he sees us. That heart is not beyond redemption. When I talk to him, he is not the one being redeemed. It's me. That's where we have to go. It's so hard. It is not our inclination to get to that place first. Often when I'm walking my dog, I end up walking with a man who walks his dog there a lot, belongs to another one of our faith communities. He's a Republican. We don't agree on some things, but we talk about a lot of things. He listens to me. And that makes me want to listen to him. We can do this over and over with different people. We get challenged at every turn lately in our world. We don't have a lot of contact with each other. We don't have an opportunity a lot to get to know people in places that aren't work, that aren't school, that aren't home, that aren't church. Where do we meet each other anymore? I gave a talk about the Nazis in Southbury last week at my congregation. I talked about one of the reasons they were successful in getting the Nazis out in the 1930s is they had the power of voluntary associations, congregations, community groups, where people of different views and different politics actually did stuff together. And part of our problem is our voluntary associations, and I say this to all the Republicans who have gathered with us today, are self-reflective groups. No matter how much we invite, sometimes people don't come over for dinner. The hardest part of making bridges is being the one to go over to the bridge to the other side. We don't know people who are like us, but we keep wanting to invite people to our table instead of being willing to sit down with them at theirs. Eat in their way, in their culture, their food, their time. Listen to them. The leading tactic among people who study ways to bring people together across differences is called contact theory. And contact theory, through dozens of studies and dozens of reputable studies, seems to show that if you put people in contact with people of different views, and different perspectives, they will come to understand each other better. If the people who are participating take part voluntarily, and if they agree to listen to each other, and if they do something together. So, for example, my congregation working with a fundamentalist congregation to serve people who are hungry would be a better way for contact to happen than just all of us sitting in a circle trying our best to learn how to listen to each other. They know this works. And we need to make more of this happen before we get to a place where we're not going to be able to do it anymore. We're going to have to engage in self-defense against people who want to enforce their hate on everybody no matter what. Because all of our neighbors who seem to have differences from us, they're not irredeemable. And neither are we. I want to be able to like more of my neighbors. I can love them, but that kind of redemptive love is real easy for a professional theologian. I can get there in ancient Greek and Hebrew. It's hard for me to talk to my Republican neighbor in English. Somehow we've got to find a way to do that. Maybe a place we can go from here, maybe, is we start having things that on purpose teach us how to better communicate across differences with each other. And then on purpose get together with people we disagree with to talk about really controversial things. A friend of mine up in Massachusetts does this at her parish every month. They call it Eat, Talk, Pray. And she is a liberal pastor in a town very much like ours, where there's a lot of political pushback. And they have had a lot of success getting people to talk about race and immigration and poverty with each other. And they don't agree. But what they've managed to do is humanize each other. There's less name calling as people drive by different candidate standouts in her town now. She's certain it has something to do with their Eat, Talk, Pray. I don't know what my people might not come if we call it pray. I know, don't talk to me about this later. But we can do something like this. We can create the opportunities to humanize and rehumanize each other. And at the same time, hold our values. Because one of the things love does not require is that you just be nice. Love requires kindness, and niceness and kindness are not the same thing. Love requires that we be kind. And kind is, when you say that, I hear a lot of hatred towards people of color. It makes me uncomfortable. It must make them uncomfortable. That's kindness. It's not niceness. Niceness is, oh, I didn't hear anything. Let's all get along just to get along. We can't do that. But we can lovingly get into rehumanizing conversation with each other. We don't want to engage in false equivalencies. That somebody's opinion of human rights and equal rights is as good as somebody else's, because they're not. You either treat people with equal dignity and respect or you don't. But it's okay to hold your values and be kind and engage across a difference. I know I can learn how to do this better. I know we can learn how to do this better. And if we have the courage to do this, we may get to a point where we start locally building the kind of world we need to be able to resolve things across those differences. We may not agree, but maybe if enough of us do this, we'll get to a point where people won't be so susceptible to thinking elections were rigged, or that bleach cures illnesses, and all kinds of other ridiculous things we've abandoned because we've lost touch with reality and each other. So I'm not going to ask you to like your neighbors. I know there's some of them that are hard to like right now. I find them hard to like too. But if we don't do our best to try and love better, love more redemptively, love more wholeheartedly, love across our difference, we've lost, and we're no longer in the moral center. Stay here in that moral center. Stay lovingly here, and love your neighbor as best as you possibly can.
Yeah.